Well, we're very close to yet another military adventure by the United States, the Bush administration. Nancy Pelosi, why don't we just cut to the quick? Everyone loves Nancy, a grandmother, first woman, Speaker of the House, third in line to the presidency. As soon as the Democrats take over the Congress in November of 2006, literally the first thing out of her mouth that we hear is, impeachment is off the table. I thought this was a catastrophic error of judgment on her part. Why would she remove the one mechanism, the one technical restraint that could possibly box in or inhibit the Bush administration from launching yet another war? Now, I've kind of looked into this, in my role as an investigative journalist, but I still haven't figured out whether she got, free iTunes downloads for a year, or maybe a Starbucks certificate, or, some kind of free Domino's or Pizza Hut deliveries. I hope she got something for it. You don't give away the ace in your deck for nothing. And that's what she did. And if there was ever an administration in the lifetime of most of the people in this room that deserves to be impeached, it's the one that's sitting in Washington, D.C. right now. I mean, rarely in American history, we don't get a lot of case studies where the evidence is so unambiguous, is so uncontroversial for impeachment, and yet it is not at all reflected in the political discourse. It has gone down Orwell's memory hole. And I think it's something that we need to be talking about. And when I talk about this issue, and I have been almost nonstop from Damascus, Tehran, Beirut, Istanbul, Manzanita, Oregon, Paonia, Colorado, Astoria, Oregon, Olympia, Washington, and now Seattle, Washington, people are very animated about it. And they do wonder, why isn't this being advanced? Why is not the Democratic Party and its leadership talking about accountability for some of the most grotesque war crimes ever recorded in American history? And when I say that, I know a little bit about American history, and the bar for war crimes is indeed very, very high. But the planning and waging of aggressive war is the supreme international war crime. And that is why German generals and high-ranking members of the Nazi hierarchy were prosecuted at Nuremberg for. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, appointed Robert Jackson as the chief prosecutor for the Allied War Tribunal at Nuremberg, a very distinguished jurist. He was a Supreme Court justice. And he was very eloquent in his final speech, his closing summation. He said with great, I think with great compassion and accuracy, that if what we do here is not applied universally, then what the Germans are saying about us, the guys in the dock, they were saying, this is victor's justice. If we had won the war, you would be sitting here. But we lost the war, so we are being prosecuted. He said, if what we do here has any meaning for future generations, then there must be the principle of universality. It must be applied across the board. And he said that the planning and waging of aggressive war, even the threat of war, which is practically occurring every single day vis-a-vis Iran, if you read and hear the belligerent and bellicose statements coming from the White House about Iran threatening the World War III, a growing danger, the Iranian menace, the greatest national security threat in the world today, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. The United States should be very careful when it talks about states sponsoring terrorism, because in fact it has itself a long and current history of sponsoring terrorism. In fact, you see what's going on in northern Iran today. good Kurds, bad Kurds. The Kurds that are attacking Turkey, they're bad Kurds. But the Kurds that are attacking Iran with our money and our weapons, they're good Kurds. So you see that kind of schizophrenia and that kind of double standard, which is not lost on people of the Middle East. We have one set of rules for the master, you know, what we say goes, the title of the new book with Chomsky, and for the master's subalterns and other acolytes, they have a permanent get-out-of-jail pass. Every time they pass go, they collect $200. But if you're on the other team, if you're a rogue state, if you're a designated enemy, if you're part of the axis of evil, then you go directly to jail. You never collect $200. You never get a get-out-of-jail pass, and you are constantly condemned. That's pretty much how the world has been operating for quite some time, particularly since the end of World War II, when the United States assumes global leadership. Now, why Iran? Why Iraq? Why the Middle East? Why are all the guns pointed there? Why are all the bases being built there? Why is the biggest embassy in the world being built in a country of 23, 24 million people, Baghdad, Iraq? There is a certain reason, there is a certain resource that is located in the Middle East. I've also done extensive research on this, and I've discovered that it is watermelons and pomegranates. For those of you, I know there's a lot of Iranian brothers and sisters here, you know that the pomegranates in Iran are of exceptional quality and of enormous value on the international market. I mean, it's just non pareil. No one can come close to it. And then, of course, in Iraq, the watermelons are simply outstanding. And this is what is attracting such peace-loving corporations and environmentally green companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, Texaco, British Petroleum, ConocoPhillips, Royal Dutch Shell, and then the Gandhian pacifist organizations such as Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Sikorsky, General Dynamics, General Electric, and all the others, the military industrial complex. Now, I know I'm very tall, and perhaps many of you can't see what I'm wearing, but it happens to be a kurta, K-U-R-T-A. This is the national kind of dress for men in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and South Asia in general. I was wearing this kurta at San Francisco Airport about 5 Fridays ago, as I now call them scareports. They should all be renamed. They have very little, well, there is air, there's hot air emanating from all of these so-called security agents who are just instilling fear, intimidation, and insecurity. So I'm walking through the scareport, going through security, and I'm asked to come over here. Come over where? Just come over here with us. We'd like to ask you a few questions and just go through your things, where you've been. So complete search of my baggage, where you're going, where are you, you know, who employs you, what do you do, these kinds of things. And then I figured out that, you know, I was being sartorially profiled. This is perhaps now a new level of racial profiling. So not only if your name is Ali or Hussein or Ahmed or Mahmouda or you know, Rashid or Rashida, if you even wear clothes that look like them, you risk the possibility of being interrogated and pulled over. So I managed to get through the scareport on that particular occasion. Now, I don't want people to get excited here. There's another little prop coming up. I told you. I understand. Again, I'm very tall, but this is a T-shirt that a marvelous peace organization in Albuquerque, New Mexico that I work with, StopTheWarMachine.org, puts out. to generate funds for its literature, for its demonstrations, for bailing people out of jail at its many civil disobedience campaigns. New Mexico, for those of you who don't know, is one of the most militarized states in the United States, and it is also the site of the two of the three labs where weapons of mass destruction are designed. At Sandia, right outside of Albuquerque. You can see them right on the Sandia Mountains, which actually means watermelon in Spanish, to connect with that great resource that attracts us. The other one is just north of Santa Fe, called Los Alamos. And south of Albuquerque, literally within the city limits of Albuquerque, is Kirtland Air Force Base, which has 1,900 nuclear weapons. Weapons of mass destruction. And so there's a bumper sticker that I don't have with me that says, weapons of mass destruction, Iran and Iraq, 0, Albuquerque, 1,900. And there's a joke going around in Albuquerque that if the city should secede, it would be the third largest nuclear power in the world after the United States and Russia. So, stopthewarmachine.org, you can go to their website. I'm giving a talk, this is last summer, in Denton, Texas, north of Dallas. I love to puncture stereotypes, and one of them is about Texas. There's a lot of interesting and counterculture things going on in Texas. There's a Pacifica station in Houston. There are peace movements in Austin and San Antonio, where I've been, and a wonderful peace and justice center in Denton, Texas. So they invited me to speak there, and I gave my talk. It was at 11 in the morning, early. And I kept my T-shirt on. I must say, not with great forethought or prescience. And so I walk into the Dallas airport wearing this T-shirt. Now I notice almost immediately I'm getting very hard stares. So is it my figure? Is it my bust line? I'm kind of thinking, what is attracting this? And then I kind of figured out this might not have been the best T-shirt I could have worn for this scareport. At the same time, I notice hundreds and hundreds of soldiers in the main terminal. I find out that they have just returned from Iraq, or Iraq, as they mispronounce it. They've just returned from Iraq. They're soldiers of the 10th Mountain Division out of Fort Drum, New York. And I'm getting, the looks again. And some of them come over to me and, start talking and trying to engage in civil discourse. And on the back of this T-shirt, I know we're on camera and on mic, so I'm not going to go off mic and off camera, but it says, "Ike was right about the military-industrial complex." And these soldiers, who are 17, 18, 19 years old, asked me, "Who's Ike?" Which allowed me to explicate a little bit, show off my high school education. He was a 5-star Allied commander of all troops in Europe, leader of the D-Day invasion. You could see, whoa, dude, he's heavy. The eyebrows went, like they're nodding it at one another. He was also a 2-time president of the United States, happened to be a Republican. And on January 17th, to go to the point now, on January 17th, 1961, as he's exiting the White House, he gives a rather extraordinary speech in which he warns the country of something, in his words, the first time this term is used, a military-industrial complex is developing in the United States. And Eisenhower felt that this was something that warranted the attention of the citizenry. It could have very infelicious consequences if it were allowed to be developed, unattended to and unsupervised. We have the original draft of Eisenhower's farewell address, by the way, and in the original it says military-industrial Congressional complex. The Congressional is crossed out. Apparently some of his aides told him, these are guys you may have to work with or play golf with in the future. you know, they owe you, you owe them. Why don't you just leave that out? And so he crosses that out. In the next paragraph, he tells the American people that this is not a permanent condition. If the citizenry is aware and knowledgeable about what's going on, that can be the greatest force to prevent the further concentration of power in the military-industrial complex. Well, imagine if Eisenhower were around today and looking at this military-industrial complex. I like to flatter myself. I think I'm somewhat educated and knowledgeable. For years, I've been speaking at, in audiences and on the radio and talking about the United States has over 100 bases in over 100 countries. And that was the standard figure I was giving. I didn't realize I was off by a factor of 7. The United States has 737 bases and installations around the world. And if you divide the 190 member states of the UN into 737, you'll come out to about 3 or 4 per country. Korea, 54 years after the end of the Korean War, is still occupied. US troops and Air Force and naval personnel remain in Europe 62 years after the end of World War II. These guys get located and they don't leave. They're not planning on leaving Iraq. They're building baseball fields. They're building bases that are permanent, that have all the accoutrements that Americans are used to, including Wendy's and Burger Kings and bowling alleys and tennis courts and swimming pools and Kmarts and Targets and all the rest. These are enormous investments of capital. And so I think we should be very leery when we hear about, possible withdrawal from Iraq. I think that's highly improbable, given the capital investment and the emotional investment that the United States, the elite, not the people of the United States, the people who run the country. We're just here as bystanders. We're supposed to show up and vote for one of the 2 millionaires that show up on the ballots every 2 and every 4 years. Jimmy Carter and others go to third world countries and, is monitoring, how democratic are elections. I think we need those kind of monitors here in this country, which is awash in corporate capital. It's a system of the highest bidder. The corporations buy all the candidates, and then they have, slight differences in nuance between the different candidates. There isn't a lot of, there's virtually no disagreement on strategy. You see that about Iran, you see it about Iraq, you see it about Afghanistan, you see it about Israel. The only difference is tactics. How do we do it? Should we use B-52s or F-16s? Should the Marines have an amphibious landing, or should there be the use of paratroopers? And then they have the debate on the NewsHour Hour with Jim Lehrer, or on Morning Edition, or All Things Considered. Now I'm talking about the elite left liberal electronic media. Those are the kinds of discussions that go on, and no one is talking about U.S. hegemony. No one talks about resources. No one talks about reality. They are in a fantasy world enabled by anchors who don't speak Arabic, don't know anything about Arab culture or history or Iraq or Islamic civilization. You have someone like Leanne Hansen on Morning Edition. I'm sorry, I know people love Leanne Hansen. She does this wonderful bit with Will Shortz around puzzles, and she's so charming. Recently, we learned in her introduction to Will Shortz 2 Sundays ago that she had been to Venice on her vacation. How wonderful, how privileged she is. Like so many Americans, just hop on a plane and go to Venice. She did say she did get her ankles wet. There is a problem with rising water there, but she managed to, step over the puddles and keep her feet dry. Meanwhile, people like Martin Indyk just dance around Leanne Hansen. I'll just give you one example, which is in the Chomsky book. This is now, we're cutting now to Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is in September of 2006. The Israeli assault on Lebanon has just ended. And Indyk, who is in fact a former US ambassador to Tel Aviv and a former member of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, arguably the most powerful lobby in Washington, is not identified as such, by the way. And he's introduced as a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. And he says that the United States has a blood debt with Hezbollah. And so Leanne Hansen says, well, what is that? Hezbollah is responsible for the murder of 241 Marines in Beirut in 1983. Now, there's a slight chronological problem here for those of you who are aware of history in Lebanon and in the Middle East. Hezbollah did not exist as an organization until 1985. So how can it be held responsible for something that happened in 1983? And so this enters the aquifer. It's regurgitated on other programs. It gains currency, and it is now repeated ad nauseum throughout the political discourse with no challenge whatsoever. It just becomes part of the discussion. Last Sunday, or was it the Sunday before, she had on Ivan Watson. I feel like it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's almost unfair to be talking. There's such easy targets, but you know, I feel it's important to talk about the elite media. There's no virtue in my critiquing Sean Hannity or Anderson Cooper or Glenn Beck or any of these other talk show hosts. It's just too easy. There's no merit in that. I think it's more important to talk about the New York Times and the Washington Post and the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer and the Charlie Rose Show and Morning Edition and All Things Considered, simply because they have this authority. You know, they're very serious. They seem to have command of the English language. They know the difference between adverbs and adjectives. They speak in complete sentences. Am I being too cruel? And they don't shout. You know, they wait until someone finishes, and then, you know, it's very civil. Thank you for being here. Wonderful to see you again, Bob. Thank you, Cokie Roberts. Great to be back. You know, so polite. It drives me crazy. I want to pull out all my false hair. So I think that's why, particularly in the Chomsky book, what we say goes is an extensive discussion of this kind of elite media. Last Sunday, I believe it was, I'm kind of in a time warp now because when you're doing one-nighters, the days kind of blur. But the most recent Leanne Hansen Sunday edition I heard was about the situation on the Turkish-Kurdish border. We learned from Ivan Watson, the NPR bureau reporter in Istanbul, that the Kurds are terrorists. They're killing Turkish troops. They're crossing the border. They're doing terrible things. They commit violence seemingly for no reason at all. They're just violent. You know, those Middle Easterners, it's in our blood, you know. I'm from there, by the way. It's in our gene pool. We just take pleasure in randomly killing people. You know, it satisfies some atavistic primordial bloodlust that clearly we're endowed with by our Creator. Unlike the Europeans and their great history of Gandhian nonviolence throughout the 20th century and its successor civilization here in North America. So if you were to have landed, as Chomsky likes to always have this control, someone lands from Mars and turns on NPR and hears this report, we'll think these people are crazy. The Kurds, I mean, they're just violent. Why is this happening? No context, no background. You know how in real estate, any of you ever bought property, you know the realtors, their mantra, location, location, location. Well, with history, with politics, it's about context, context, context. And if you don't know what has happened, what is the locus for what is transpiring, you're completely lost and vulnerable to being manipulated. Yes, even you. And so you don't learn from Leanne Hansen, and she does not ask Ivan Watson, well, what could be motivating these people? And I'm thinking, well, now we're going to find out. It must be that 5,000 to 6,000 Kurdish villages were razed to the ground by the Turkish military in the 1980s and 1990s. It must be that the Kurds have been a target of repression and oppression on a state level, official racism by the Ankara government. It can't be about tens of thousands of Kurds that were killed by Turkish military forces. No, they're simply wild, savage people. They enjoy killing for killing's sake. So you don't learn any of the history. You don't learn that the Kurds represent the largest population group in the world without a state. They straddle 4 countries: Iran, Syria, Turkey, and Iraq. In Iraqi Kurdistan, which is now basically a de facto state, it's kind of part of Iraq, but anybody who's been there knows that it's already created its own infrastructure. If you go to the Turkish border, as I did, and look and talk to the people there, it's all Peshmerga. That is the Kurdish militia. They're all speaking Kurdish. There's a Kurdish flag, no Iraqis to be seen, no Arabic to be heard, no Iraqi flag to be seen. It is already a de facto state. This is one of the, I would say, one of the consequences of the divide and rule policy in the Middle East, and something that almost every single Middle Easterner that I spoke to that is in opposition to what is going on, not those that love the U.S. like Fouad Ajami and Kanan Makia and Irshad Manji and other people like that. That if you're from there, you go to the front of the line because if you're a collaborator and one of them, you are immediately promoted on all the media as someone with great insight. Because you can say and pronounce je. Not like Katie Couric, who remembers Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's name by the mnemonic, "I'm not a dinner jacket." She only earns $15 million a year. What do you want? Come on. I mean, do you have to know Farsi to be able to say Ahmadinejad? It's not that difficult. It just takes a little bit of effort and imagination. But, that kind of thing, Iraq, Iran, the Taliban, Pakistan, all of that stuff, Saddam, that was the classic. Linking Saddam to, the biblical memory of Sodom and Gomorrah was, I thought, lexical genius, something that Goebbels would have turned green with envy. Indeed, today, until today, people like Ted Koppel and others say Sodom, I may have to deprogram myself because I say Saddam, Saddam Hussein, they say Saddam Hussein until today, and Iraq. I think that's indicative of the kind of contempt that some sectors of elites in the United States and in Europe have for them, the other, the people that wear funny clothes and have weird customs, like not wanting their homes broken in the middle of the night, and boots put on their heads, and being yelled at in American slang that they can't understand, and so they're blown away at checkpoints all over Iraq. I mean, there was this big hullabaloo recently about Black Hawk killing 17 Iraqis. We have been talking about this, the people who have some information about what's going on in Iraq since the early days of the invasion and occupation. This has been de rigueur. It's been routine. Iraqis routinely being blown away at checkpoints by trigger-happy either GIs who can't speak a word of Arabic and know nothing about the culture. And and knowing that if you put your hand up like this in Iraqi kind of sign language, it means hi. It doesn't mean stop. And when the GIs do things like this, turn off your ignition key, they don't know what this is, and they kind of wave back, and then they're opened up. So these kinds of shootings have been routine. When I was in Syria, I've been there a couple of times, most recently in late June, I interviewed Iraqi refugees, and the stories are absolutely heartbreaking, and if I start thinking about them, I'll have trouble finishing this lecture. I just Very, very difficult kinds of things that are going on in a classic colonial racist war. You know, we have privileged ourselves over them. They are dark, they are benighted, they are bedraggled. It's very much like Conrad in The Heart of Darkness. You know, if you want to understand what's really going on, you should, you know, like read into the past, read into what the Belgians did in the Congo in one of the most rapacious mass murder campaigns ever conducted by any of the European colonial powers. And in Iraq, Iraq presents for the propaganda meisters in Washington a real opportunity, as does Iran. They're taking all the old talking points about Iraq and changing the Q in Iraq to an N, and they're just recirculating the same press releases about how Iran is now a great danger. Iran is getting weapons. Iran is going to attack us. Condoleezza Rice, who Cy Hirsch told me was the most incompetent national security advisor in the history of the United States, and he's been around and has seen almost all of them, is then promoted as to Secretary of State. She announced recently that Iran poses the greatest threat to the national security of the United States, and that, you know, that cliche that cascades from their mouths like, you know, just water, that it is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. It's interesting how terrorism is quantified and qualified. Of course, state terrorism, which is enormous, and is absolutely lethal in terms of killing massive numbers of people, as the United States has done in Afghanistan and Iraq. You'll notice that I don't leave out Afghanistan, because it has been totally marginalized, even by the peace movement. We're very virtuous about Iraq because, you know, it seems to be like such a clear-cut case of aggression, and it is. But it's not very different from the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, which is unraveling itself. The Taliban is resurgent there, getting a lot of support from our moderate ally in Islamabad, General Pervez Musharraf. So Iraq is, we're now led to believe that Iran is a huge danger to the United States, a country that has 737 military bases around the world, that spends $750 billion on the military every year. I'm including the supplemental military bills that are passed, that are not officially part of the Pentagon budget. So if you add those in, it's close to $750 billion. What about the expenditure of this country that we should all be, you know, whenever we hear its name, Iran, we should be trembling in our boots, we should be quaking with fear. I mean, I don't think we should leave the hall tonight. You know, as I came in here, I noticed, you know, the Iranian Navy right off the coast of Vashon and Bainbridge Island. It was very scary. And helicopter gunships flying over West Seattle, Alki Drive, I saw them today. Submarines surfacing. I mean, the brazenness of it. They just have no shame. They flaunt their military power with no respect for international law and basic human decency. How much does this so-called warmongering state, which has not attacked a country in 250 years, you know, you would be hard-pressed to go through our history, or their history, for more than 2.5 years where the United States has not committed some act of aggression. And if you include the Indian Wars, which began almost immediately and continued right up through Wounded Knee and Pine Ridge, you would almost say every year there was some kind of aggression and military action, you know, from Grenada to Chile, to Cuba, to Nicaragua, to Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, and on and on and on. I mean, the history of the United States is largely hidden from the people of the United States. And I think if Eisenhower were alive today and making this statement about the military-industrial congressional complex, I would add the educational system and the media system as well to that, because it's all part of one fabric. We have an educational system that doesn't educate, doesn't teach critical analysis, doesn't teach people how to deconstruct arguments, and we have a media system that doesn't inform, that provides people with more information about K-Fed's divorce with Britney Spears and whether Jen Aniston has really recovered from Brad Pitt leaving her, and are Brad and Angelina really happy, and what about all those babies they're adopting, and is Michael Vick's football career over because he tortured and killed dogs, or should he be allowed to play football? Who is the real parent? Who's the real father of Anna Nicole Smith's baby? And those kinds of things, and will the Seahawks finally make it to the Super Bowl this year? Is this the year for the Seahawks to finally win the big trophy? I mean, these are the kinds of things. No. Then Mike Holmgren, who is way overpaid, should be fired. And if you listen to, I haven't listened to the sports shows here, but I know if I would tune them in, you will find spirited and detailed discussions about every aspect of the Seahawks, the players. This player is so good, he should be given, a special award. This guy stinks, they should trade him or cut him and get rid of him. The coach is overrated. I mean, just an enormous amount of discussion. I'd like to see, people talk about Maria Cantwell like that, or, Pelosi again, and people like that. And I mentioned supplemental bills in the military, and now you see this kind of stream of consciousness delivery. There was an Iraq-Afghan war appropriations bill this past spring that had a sentence in it that said, the Bush administration cannot initiate military action against Iran without congressional approval. And, it was in there, the bill passes. Then we're looking at the bill. It's gone. What happened to it? Nobody knows. Apparently, according to The Nation magazine, the Democrats, specifically Pelosi, came under pressure from AIPAC and other groups to remove that particular sentence from that appropriations bill. So she has, I believe, a lot to answer for. And this issue of impeachment, I'm coming back to it again, is extremely important for moral reasons. I don't care about the pragmatic arguments, because that's what the Democrats are saying. The votes aren't there. It's not about whether the votes aren't there. It's whether you are a person of principle that will stand up and defend the law of the land. Or are you a good German that simply looks away and said, I don't know what was happening? And by not doing anything, by not initiating impeachment proceedings in the House Judiciary Committee, whose chair is John Conyers, who should be hearing from you almost every day, by not doing that, the next administration, the next president, whoever she may be, will say justifiably, Bush got away with murder. What's stopping me? So that precedent, I think, will be extremely deleterious for our democracy, what's left of it. I mean, it's in a pretty parlous state. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, there's still a pulse if you go in there, and if you're the cadaver, the line is still moving on that machine, but it's in the ICU, it's on respirators, it's on IVs, it's in horrible, horrible shape. And if we don't resurrect the democracy, we are going to turn into the next Rome. We're going to be a runaway military state that is conquering the world and will engender enormous amounts of hostility and hatred. And it's almost, they're not satisfied with what they've done in Afghanistan and Iraq. They want to take the show on to Iran. And when I was in Iran, a lot of Iranians, they were making a really bad joke. They were telling me, David, we know what the Bush exit strategy is out of Iraq. I said, oh, well, please tell me. I'm dying to find out. They're going to come through Iran. Iran has always been in their gun sights from the very beginning. This particular junta, this particular group of warlords. These are real warlords. I mean, the guys in Afghanistan that we call warlords and are described as warlords in the media, they're almost like altar boys compared to, just in terms of scale of violence. I mean, they do terrible things, but they're localized terrible things. The reach of the imperial warlords in Washington is global. And the havoc that they can engender, the chaos, the carnage, the rivers of blood that are flowing in Iraq, over 1 million Iraqis killed, maybe 1.5 million, 2 million wounded, no one knows exactly. We're not counting. We don't do body counts, as Tommy Franks proudly announced, because they're wogs, not said, of course. You know, they are them, they are the other, they are, you know, Arabs, and they don't matter. But every time some kid from Fort Lewis here, or some kid from Fort Carson in Colorado dies, we learn his name, his age, we find out he loves poetry, he was a great fisher person, he loved music, he played a mean guitar, and you identify with them, right? You read these and, God, that could be my son, it could be my brother, it could be my husband, just like me, you know. He wanted to be a teacher when he grew up, or he wanted to be a doctor, you know, he was an EMT and he wanted to go back to medical school. And you read these things and quite, you know, it engenders sympathy. I mean, it's not a bad thing. But where do you read about, you know, Ali Hussein? Or, you know, or Hashmat, or Nader Hashemi, or any, you know, Iraqi, or Iranian, or Kurd, or Armenian, or Palestinian. They are invisible. They have no lives, they have no aspirations, they have no hopes. And it's our stories that are reified, that are iterated. And that is the inherent racism of this whole imperial project in the Middle East, because it's always about oil. And until and unless we start disabusing ourselves of the fairy tales that enshroud us all, these myth stories about our benign intent, about our benevolence, about our kindness, about how we want to spread democracy and freedom and liberty and share the bounty of these great, you know, political systems of organization to the benighted masses in the third world, or as Conrad says, those with darker complexions than ours and slightly flatter noses, then, you know, we'll never understand what's going on, because we're in a world of Garcia Marquez. We're engaged in magical thinking. Pigs fly. We've created an America that exists perhaps in textbooks only, but not in reality. So it's incumbent, and here you make the connection with the media. Since the American people, most people are heavily dependent on media for information, they are subject to being, they're acutely vulnerable to being manipulated and to being propagandized. And it's very hard to tell people that they are subject to propaganda. What do you mean? I go into a store, there are 800 magazines, I turn on the radio, there are 50 different stations, AM, FM, there are 500 channels on cable TV. No one tells me what to do or what to see or what to think. But the system of propaganda here is insidious, and it is invasive, and it is extensive. And until and unless, you know, we really build an independent media that is not yoked to the war chariot in Washington, that is not yoked to the imperial war machine, it's going to be very, very difficult for people to get a handle on reality. So that's another project that we have to work on, and there has been some movement, some development in this area. The United States has an extensive community radio network, for example. That's where I come from. That's how I learned what I'm doing. KGNU in Boulder took me on with no background, no training, and I started doing radio in Boulder. There's WMNF in Tampa, St. Pete. There's KBOO in Portland, Oregon. There's WRT in Madison. I mean, there's a whole range of community radio stations, and now we have such, you know, spectacular programs like Amy Goodman's Democracy Now!, which just celebrated its 10th anniversary. It started off in 1996 as a temporary program. It was on 5 radio stations, the 5 Pacifica stations. And, you know, when the election, the 96 election was going to take place, it would disappear. But there was a tremendous clamoring to keep it on the air. So there are some glimmers of light, and those lights, we need to expand them. You know, we need to make them shine. And so they need your support. So building an independent media is a very important part of the democratic movement of democratizing the country. Well, when I was in Iraq, I did talk to a lot of Iraqi refugees, and it is the largest refugee crisis in the world today. But you wouldn't know it from reading the newspaper of record, the New York Times, which regularly runs full-page ads about Darfur and how terrible things are in Darfur, and, you know, please do something, stop the genocide, stop the killing. And these are good things. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. But Darfur dwarfs in comparison to what is going on in Iraq. 3 million Iraqis are internally displaced. Huge swaths of the country have been ethnically cleansed. About 3 million are now living in Syria and Lebanon, in Jordan, in Egypt, and in Turkey, and in Iran. The one country that doesn't let them in at all is that moderate, progressive Muslim state that we all love, Saudi Arabia. Arguably the most fundamentalist regime in the world, homophobic, misogynist, racist, patriarchal in the extreme. In the media, our liberal media, it is routinely called a moderate state. I mean, this is quite a leap of imagination to call states like Mubarak's Egypt and Abdullah's Jordan and the Saudi dynasty in Riyadh as a moderate state. Yet this passes in the discourse with no comment whatsoever. 50 to 100,000 Iraqis are leaving the country every month. 80% of Iraqis do not have access to clean water. Do you think that makes a difference? There is now rampant diarrhea, dysentery, hepatitis, typhus, cholera. For the first time in modern Iraq's history, there is incidence of cholera. 9 of its 18 provinces have reported cholera. Thousands and thousands, of course, perhaps 1.2 million Iraqis have been killed. There's less electricity than before. Garbage is piled high in the streets. There's no sanitation to speak of. Yes, and I know I have to raise my hand like everyone you know, on the left and do the, you know, 30 seconds of, yes, Saddam Hussein was terrible, he did horrible things, he killed so many people, and he was a butcher and all. Yes, 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 yes. We know all of those things. If you ask any single Iraqi today, the ones I talked to, the refugees, every single one of them said that they long for the days of Saddam Hussein, when there was security in Iraq. Of course, they knew, you know, you had to walk the straight and fine line. And they knew the parameters, like the Soviet Union. If you stayed within those parameters, you were absolutely, you know, okay. Women could walk in total safety at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Schools were open. Iraq had the best educational system in the Middle East. It's now exceeded by Iran, by the way, which has a very high literacy rate and a very high rate of training women. 65% of all college and university students in Iran today are women. And when I was there, I noticed, you know, in the media, tremendous representation from women in medical professions, in the sciences, engineering, architecture, etc. None, of course, in government. And Shireen Ebadi, a Nobel Prize winner, who I will talk about soon. So I know I'm going back and forth between Iran and Iraq, but I just want to impress upon you that this is one of the uncontroversial war crimes in all of human history, certainly in the lifetime of many of the people in this room, and absolutely deserves some kind of accountability. Someone has to pay for the crimes of invasion.